Hello, everyone. Welcome to our demo and swag series on automatically winning culture. I am your host here today, Helen Rankin, Chief Brand Officer at SwagUp. And I am so excited to have Martin, the founder of the People group, and really excited to have him co-hosting with me today. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks for having me. I'm stoked. I'm so stoked.
I'm excited to have you and talk to you about how to automatically win culture. So let's get into it. So Martin, for people that don't know, the People group, you have a huge community and network of HR culture folks that are in this group, and you must hear all of the ins and outs of what people are going through in the HR community. And something that I'd always kind of wonder, and we also have a lot of HR customers as well, but I would say out of any team within a company or organization, HR's probably been hit the most in the last 5 years. And so I'm curious from your take, from your community and so forth, what are some of the challenges or where do you see, HR and culture stand today for a lot of companies?
Yeah, no, it's you hit the nail on the head in terms of like the temperature for people and culture folks and people. Yeah, out of so we've got like 5,000 members across North America and across a few different continents as well. So I have this interesting like viewpoint, and anyone who's a member has this like interesting viewpoint into like what's going on. And so what I think has been like there's the what I do for the company side of things and then what I do for myself as a people ops person. And so first off, it's bubbled up in terms of priority. So a lot of the times previously, um, some of the themes that we would hear is, HR doesn't necessarily have a seat at the table, or we don't really, the people ops folks, it's not a priority. And what we've seen is by nature of companies realizing and recognizing and really kind of being forced to really address what like good culture looks like. Um, those are now being prioritized in either programs or initiatives, or just even the employee experience is being looked at with a much bigger lens, as well as like more executives and leaders are looking at it and saying, okay, like we really need to make sure that if we want to stand out, even just with the economic circumstance of like what a lot of companies in tech are sort of going through, they're
Yeah.
looking at it and saying, okay, well, we still need to be able to stand out in important ways. And yeah, it's been the short version is it's come from sort of like not as big of a priority, and it's always been important to people, of course, but it's been easier to a certain extent to kind of advocate and get things across the table in terms of like this is important, why it's important, and tying it back to that business need just becomes more obvious because everyone who might have opposed it or just taken a while to maybe come around to an idea or a program that's not necessarily top of mind or immediately revenue generating, they're seeing the impact. They've already seen the impact of what happens when you don't take care of your culture.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's kind of gone through some phases, the culture. And I think, back in like the very startup days, like pre-COVID, where everyone was like working out of WeWorks and starting stuff, I think they thought that like having like a keg and like a like, ping pong table was like the extent of like culture.
Yeah.
And now we've kind of shifted during COVID to be a little bit more thoughtful. And then the layoffs kind of like, I feel like went through another change where they're like, well, screw culture. We just need to survive. Don't care about all these like ancillary extras. People can either sink or swim or, they're with us or they're not. But I think in that, like they realize that your culture is going to take a hit when those things happen,
Mm.
and you still have to come back and focus on the people, and that's all that really matters, because if your people aren't going to stay, if they're not happy, you're not going to be as successful, and even less so during those hard times. I would say companies that we worked with that maybe didn't have as great of a culture or weren't prioritizing that as much it took them a lot longer to get back,
Yeah.
without prioritizing that culture. And I think that we also are seeing that as well with a lot of our customers, where HR and culture folks are definitely getting a bigger seat at the table, and it's becoming more of a discussion. So that brings me to my next question. Like, now that we know, this is kind of where HR sits, HR is now getting a bigger seat at the table. What challenges do you see for them now that they are able to kind of step into this a role where you now have a little bit more leverage than you did before to be able to do some of these things? And what are some things that they can do to help automate some of that too?
Yeah. No, and I mean, automation is like a really good, I mean, it's what we're here to chat about. So it's a really good point to kind of raise. But I think the thing that isn't related to AI and automation, but you would benefit from using it, is the fact that, and this is has been said, but it's never been more true than now, and that is, if you are an HR business partner, or if you're responsible for people and culture, or if you're responsible for a department and their engagement, and you're the person responsible for that, um, understanding the business intimately across the board becomes the thing that makes you indispensable as a HR and people and culture person. And so I think the challenges, for people and culture folks and HR folks, is that if you're not if you're if you've gone, maybe you've been at one company for like 3 or 4 years and you move to another company, you're well experienced, but maybe you've sort of had this like hyper focus on just the tactical side of HR. The role has really evolved into the people, the HR, the people that I see moving up and moving in their careers and getting upward trajectory, are the ones that branch out beyond that space and really get to understand. It's like, okay, you know who all the people are on the sales team. You know that some are account managers and some are account executives, and you know the difference between that. But maybe you don't know which product lines they sell, and maybe you don't know which products
Mhm.
are being launched, and you don't have that like true fundamental overarching view, because you can only really gather so much information in the HR space if you're not using the product every day. And so the folks in the company that do use the product every day, if you're like a customer success manager and you understand the nature of the product by nature of your role. So I think there's always this like leaning, like, I understand the people, I understand the company, but you really need to understand the business of the company. And so that's the biggest challenge, I think, for anyone if they don't do that. And so that takes a lot of time. There's a lot of like tacit knowledge that you need to have. Um, and there's ways you can use automation to make the like operational side and the tactical side of your job easier, so that you can actually spend more time getting to not only know the leaders of the business and the employees on those teams, but actually understanding what it is that they do for the business. And I think that's like the key point, that folks, once someone figures that out, you kind of see their trajectory kind of like take off.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just very hard to do that, I think, for anyone to do that at scale.
Mm,
And especially with remote, like I always say this with my own team, that we're completely remote. But my one-on-ones with them, they're booked for a certain amount of time, but most times they go a little over, because I want to get to know my team really personally, and I'm not having those water cooler conversations with them. I'm
mm,
not walking into the office and like, how was your morning? Like, those little brief interactions just get completely dismissed in a remote environment. So it's hard to kind of see, what they decorate their desk as, and like kind of understand their personality, and like see like what they like. You really take some of that stuff for granted sometimes if you're remote. Um, and it does make it a little bit challenging. So if do you have you seen any automations or things that AI is doing to help kind of set these people up for success so that they're not, maybe, yes, there is a level of depersonalization that you definitely have to do. And I don't know if AI will ever solve that. I don't think it will.
Mhm.
But I do think there's things that could help. What are things that you're seeing some people in your community or just in general using to kind of help them get
Yeah,
there?
I think in terms of, I mean, there's a laundry list of things that I know. In the later half of this, we're going to chat about how SwagUp can fall into this. So just to double check, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some interesting tools that I've seen. A lot of interesting tools by nature of the people group, and companies kind of recognizing that there's this audience of 5,000 HR people in it. A lot of times I get sort of early stage, early startup companies in the HR and culture space reaching out, wanting to either be a part of the community or sort of partner with the community. And so I get this, like, I love hearing and learning about new tools and stuff that makes things makes it easier to do your job. I think one of the big things that um, one of the tools that is standing out to me that I've messed around with recently, even just for on the community building side of things, that actually applies to a bunch of different functions, is Scribe, and they're basically an automation tool that lets you um, kind of just like show people how to do a task that's like a lot of clicks, right? It's like, okay, well, how do I update my profile here? It just creates the documentation automatically. And that's a big part of like the people and culture side, is like, okay, we need to give people documentation on how to do the things that they need to do. And instead of, like, you see a long list of text nowadays, now more than ever, it's just like, I'm just going to get ChatGPT to summarize this because I don't want to read it all. And you're going to miss
I'm
important
just gonna Slack
information.
someone to show me anyway. So
Exactly. So tools like that, on the culture building side, like, that doesn't necessarily build culture, but that actually increases like the amount of people that are going to do the thing properly. So you have to spend less time like answering the question that you've answered in an email 4 or 5 times, kind of thing. Like, it's just
Mhm.
creating different ways for people to engage with policies, procedures, or processes within an organization. Another one that stands out to me is CultureBot. It's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of different companies. Like, there was one called Meetsy, I think it's called something else now, like Matcha or something like that. And Donut, I think everybody knows Donut, that would like match people up. And I think, to your point, right, it's like it doesn't solve everything
Nope.
by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a tool that can make your life easier so that you can spend more time on the like high value tasks, like having a conversation with somebody and getting to know them personally. And so the thing I've always liked about those is, if done well, especially like the pairing, the Slack apps that pair people up or pair people up over email, is that it's the closest thing you can kind of get to um, just sort of like that water cooler conversation. And the culture bot, for example, has a cool little feature where it's just and if you're a member of the community, like, we've got a channel called the break room, and
Yeah.
every Wednesday some random funny gif pops up with a question, and you get to know the people in your community a little better. And it seems like, if you explain that to somebody who doesn't know what you do, in terms of like, oh, what do you do for, like, well, this today I set up an automation that provides a Giphy in a Slack channel, and people tell me what their favorite pizza is. Like,
Right.
that doesn't sound like it's important.
Ideally, but at the same time, it's those automations that can help kind of replicate or mimic some of those
Yeah.
more in-person experiences, which bring me to kind of some of the automations that we are offering now at SwagUp that help people in HR and culture kind of take some three key steps out of their day when it comes to new hires, birthdays, and anniversaries. Those are kind of the three that we are, within our platform are able to automate swag or some type of gift getting sent out. integrating directly with your HR platform. So huge save because it's more of a set and forget.
Mm.
But so I'm going to talk about this first one. So we have this new hire pack, and we have a couple of cool really items in here with, and something that stands out for me is we have items that can be set on your desk, which are really great for people to have kind of that cultural reminder and have that gift, something that they're utilizing all the time. Then you have some lower cost stuff like stickers or mug that also are just really good items that they can use right away. But what are some things, do you see any like tips or things that people do for new hires that are interesting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I I know you know this already, but like I'm a huge fan of the sticker just from like the laptop that's like
Hmm.
I've had a few stories now, which is actually kind of awesome where people just say like because I asked about your sticker from like in some coffee shop, other people have joined the community. And I know that's not what happens necessarily from like an employee perspective where it's like, oh, we just hired somebody cause, but it's
It's
those.
good brand awareness
Yeah.
about their company, and if they're putting it on their laptop and stuff, like they're kind of the internal ambassadors for the company, and it also just shows that they love the company they work at if they're immediately putting that sticker on their laptop or certain items that they use. But there are also great conversations between employees, especially if those like stickers or collectibles. We have some clients that use them as kind of collectibles and they have different ones each year. So like which year you were hired and it's kind of like a little badge of honor. But those are some really cool things that we do. But yeah, I think the stickers is kind of like those uh, people don't think it's a big deal, but it's kind of a must in any swag that we do.
That's a
Then we
great
have
question.
the anniversaries, which is another point where a lot of people in HR and in culture they get kind of stuck on. Some I know a lot of companies that don't even give anything because they're like it's too hard. I don't know what to do. It's a lot of work for me manually to send these out. And again, with this automation, you can just kind of set it to forget. Um, and it's something that comes up for me with anniversaries and even with birthdays. There was a podcast with Sheryl Sandberg where she was talking about how they used to do like one-off gifts every time, and it became really unmanageable for her team to do them as they started to like add more and more and more employees. So she's like, anything you do within HR, you just have to kind of think about it in multiples. Like if you only have 20 people in your company, like what would you do if you had 100? And what
Mm.
would you do, so forth. So when it comes to anniversaries, what do you see there on for anniversaries that is kind of unique and interesting?
Yeah, as an example from like a previous company I worked at, um, just kind of staying true to the like brand first off and
Mhm.
working with the employee base to say, well, like first off, if you have like a big milestone and it's the first time you've gone through that milestone, then just having everybody celebrate it together is huge. And to your point
I love
about
that.
like think about it in multiples, like how are we going to do this when we hit this milestone or when we double the milestone or whatever. But
Mhm.
the kind of sticking to the brand, like the previous company I was with, Coinsquare, it was like a cryptocurrency exchange, and so we found like coins that were like specific, and it was like happy 1 year kind of thing. And so trying to find something that doesn't have to be like specific, literally a thing that's related to your brand, but something that associates nicely. And there's like always that it's nice to have that like personal touch associated to it, but people understand that like not not every gift's gonna be, like, specifically like, "Here's the thing that
Over
you
the
wanted for
top.
Christmas." Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that you do anything, I think so few companies make time and effort to do the anniversary piece that just looking at it and, like, if you do nothing or you send a sticker, that's still something, right? Like,
Mhm.
you've already leveled up there, and as you grow and scale maybe, or as the person's tenure scales up, that if you think about the cost of losing that person because they didn't feel appreciated in that moment, like
It's so much more.
what's the cost of a watch comparatively to like losing your senior most like VP event, right? It's
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it's peanuts, right? So
Yeah, we've actually had some of our customers with, it's not, I would say it's kind of like a hybrid between an anniversary and a new hire pack, is they'll send a 90-day pack.
ooh,
So yes, which is such an interesting take, especially for companies that have call centers or high volume or struggle with retention, like that role, like maybe there's a certain department that it's just very hard to keep people in that role and you're constantly hiring. Um, that 90-day gift has tremendously helped a lot of our customers in terms of retention. So they'll celebrate like that you're new hire, but it's also kind of like you've met this 90-day mark. And just sending them something like thank you for, for you've completed your training and you're officially like part of the group, you're one of us. It's made such a difference for a lot of companies that we work with in terms of retention. So that was something that was really interesting out of the launch of this integration that came out, that we had customers like, yeah, I'm going to use it for this. And we're like, this is interesting take on the new hire and kind of an anniversary. Um, yeah. So now we'll go into the birthday pack, which this is another thing that I think a lot of people in HR, there's not a standard rule. Some people do the cake, celebrate everyone's birthday month once a month, or do something, little. But to your point, I mean, we have customers that just send out a gift card, and that's completely enough for birthdays. But I think this is something that's very unexpected if your company actually celebrates this for you.
yeah. I like the idea of a company doing more for something for their own employee than maybe that employee might get from like their own like friends and family circle. Like that just highlights the like level of appreciation that the company has for them, in that moment that they remembered. And I mean, it's funny. We hosted an event recently, and a friend of mine met another friend of mine who didn't know each other prior to, but the one he's I think in his like 50s or 60s, and he basically introduced this other friend of mine who's a little bit younger to this. Just he's like simple hack of just like, I make sure I find out everybody's birthday and I put it in my calendar, and I say, like, every person he's ever met, that person's getting a happy birthday message from him. And it's just like no other reason than to just be like, hey, I'm thinking of you. And
Yeah.
enjoying that, coffee that we had that one time. And he copied it. And so I got a happy birthday message from him. And I'm like, whoa, are you still in the playbook? And it means a lot. It means a lot. And so
Yes.
taking it seriously is a good idea.
No, I agree, and it's very unexpected. So being able to kind of have that hyper personalization, I would say like the birthdays is definitely it. It's not anticipated for your job to even send you like a card or a chocolate bar or something for your birthday. So to even get anything in the mail is, I think, is beyond. But that brings us to our end of our session, Martin. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you, in the People group?
Yeah, no, if you go to thepeoplepeoplegroup.com, that's our website for the community. I run a fractional consulting firm as well. That's purpleumbrella.co, and we just help smaller early stage companies figure out their stuff when it comes to people operations. And when it comes to swag, we always recommend SwagUp. And we're going to be using SwagUp. We just started about a year and a half ago, so we've yet to make that initial investment, but Rob's been doing awesome for us, and so
Oh, amazing.
he's we're looking at it from like a client perspective as well too. So there's a million things to do. But yeah, Martin, if you Martin Hawk, if you can't find me on LinkedIn, your Wi-Fi is probably broken. So
Well, thank you so much, Martin. Thanks for joining us. And now we're going to get into our demo portion of this series. Our platform has a lot of integrations that you can directly integrate to all of your HRS platforms, like Deal. We have Bamboo. There's thousands of options that you have. And our account executive, Erica Tracy, will be taking the wheel here on showing us the SwagUp platform.